Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Today I'll be talking about what is Facebook Conversion API or CAPI. Why does it matter and why is it so important for you to understand why you need to start being more technical when you're measuring your conversions. With Apple iOS 14 launch coming soon and with all the changes that's happening, that it will affect not just iOS users, but all users. There's been a lot of talk on groups online about this, and I want to cover in this video a couple of things that I've seen that people have questioned. Why does this matter? Why do you need to know about Facebook CAPI or Conversion API? What is the difference between cookie and server tracking? I know this is not widely known, but I think it's important for you to understand the difference between tracking users through a cookie versus a server. How will this affect your ads? And this is the most important thing. How will your audiences, your conversions, your return on ad spend, how will this all affect your campaigns and the performance of all of the investment that you're doing within Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp? The issues of verifying your domains, how to verify it, and also just making sure that you have access to the domain so that you can actually implement events. Understand how to prioritize your events, depending whether you're an e-commerce site or lead generation. There's a whole discussion on this as well, and I'll give you my input there and resources that can help you better understand everything that is happening with Facebook and also with all the changes that are coming with regards to the API. So how did this all start? And it all started on December 17th when Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, published this tweet. We believe users should have the choice over data. So it's basically allowing users to say, hey, I'm letting Facebook track my behaviors, everything that I'm doing on the app or not. So this is going to limit and it's going to affect a lot of, you'll see ads, performance, even like the experience that you're having within Facebook, because it's going to limit how much Facebook can actually track what you're doing within the application. And one of the things that I think it's important for you to see as well is that even if you block Facebook, that does not mean that they're not going to be able to track you on different websites. There's two different things. And I think this is very important to know. So why does this matter? Because it's actually, you're basically losing the ability to track users. It's blocking basically Facebook from being able to share all the things that you're doing on your phone so that you can actually use those behaviors, use all that information that Facebook is collecting on you, on me, on everyone, so that you can actually target better. If you think about, what's the number one thing that Facebook has is segmentation. It's the ability for you to be able to really do really cool targeting. The machine learning, the amount of data that they collect on users are insane. And Apple is basically coming out and saying, hey, you're not going to be able to actually collect all of that info anymore. We're actually going to limit this from you. And so this is actually going to affect the targeting and also the performance on your campaigns. So yes, it is a big deal because this is what's basically doing, like Pat about, like, would you like permission to track you across apps, websites owned by other companies? Do you allow tracking or not? Based on, adoption of other iPhones and other iPhone, more than iPhones is like systems, it's going to take a while, right? This is going to take a couple of months for people to actually start, one, updating their iOS systems and accepting this. So you're not going to see the effects immediately, but we're already seeing some repercussions when it comes to domain verification and also, how attribution is working. And so what is Facebook CAPI or Conversion API, and what does this matter in everything that we're doing? And it comes down to this, and this is a very, very technical explanation, but I'm going to show you with the little graphs and things how this actually works. So Conversion API is basically a relaunch of what used to be the server-side API of Facebook. So you used to be able to push data conversions through the servers and not through the browser, right? How does this different? And what's the difference between a cookie-based, not attribution, but also tracking, or a server-based tracking? And it's important to understand this difference because this is where things are moving towards. The industry is moving towards blocking web browser cookies, and you're going to have to transition into client server cookies, or not necessarily cookies, but tracking. And this is where Conversion API comes into play, because you're actually pushing data not through the browser, but through the server. What does this mean? Because this is all technical. You see a lot of code here, like what the hell is going on? And so very simple, cookie-based tracking, what it does is when you as a consumer, as a user, you go into the browser, you browse through, a Shopify store, an e-commerce store, any website that has Facebook Pixel installed. What it does is that through the browser, there's a cookie, right? And what I mean by a cookie is like a code that is sending all these data back to Facebook. So if you look into, I want to say my website, for example, if you look into the website, you have a pixel event here. And so when people actually visit the website, the browser is collecting that information through the pixel or through this cookie. And this is what a cookie-based tracking model or it works. And this sends the data back to Facebook. So when people go into the browser, you visit the browser, and it sends the data back into Facebook. So it goes directly from the browser into the Facebook, and this can be Google, this can be LinkedIn, this could be any ad platform. What are the setbacks, or what are the challenges here is that we're moving into a world where users are actually taking a lot of importance into their privacy. And so because of that, there has to be a different way for ad platforms to understand and get more information on how users are behaving within the platform. Why? Because if I block this, if as a user I block all cookies, then you're not, the ad platform is not able to collect that information from yourself, which from a privacy perspective, it's great. But from a marketing perspective or a performance marketing perspective, it sucks, because then it's really hard for me to be able to track what the user is doing, whether the user bought, whether they added to a cart, what are the things or events that people did on the website. I'm investing all these money to get people on my website, and yet I can't track it. And this is where server tracking comes into play and can actually improve the performance and the data that you're pushing into the platform. So unlike a cookie-based platform where same thing, the consumer goes into the website, you have the pixel, and then through the browser, data is not going to be sent, right? Because I'm blocking that data. It actually goes through the server. And what I mean by the server is, think about all websites are hosted somewhere. You can think about, when you think about the cloud, it's actually a physical location somewhere where you have a server and you're hosting your website there, or your page or your app or whatever you're doing. So what you're basically doing is, instead of sending the data through the browser, you're actually sending the data through the server. And that's where the Conversion API comes into play, because the Conversion API, think of it an API as a bridge. What it's doing, it's bridging your server where you're hosting your website, your app, anything that your product basically, and the platform. So that if people block, the browser, you can still send the data because the server is collecting that data and you're sending it through the Conversion API. And what this does is that it improves the amount of data you're collecting, and therefore it improves also the performance and the reporting, the attribution, the conversions, everything that you're tracking within your site. And so it's important to understand that cookie-based versus server-based tracking are similar, but they work pretty differently. And it's important, it's also, keep in mind that the industry is moving towards less cookie-based tracking because privacy is slowly, and I want to say this is going to become more quickly, it's becoming more important to protect our data, our privacy, our data. We just don't want our data to be out there. And there's more and more people who are starting to block cookie-based tracking. And so you have to know and understand that there's other ways that you can still measure it. And you can still access that data, probably not as much. And the iOS update will, hinder and limit the amount of data that Facebook is collecting from you. But you can still track conversions and you'll still be able to do certain things. So how is this affecting your ads and why is this so important? One of the things that I think I want to clarify is that if a user selects not to be tracked on an iOS device, that means that everything that you're doing on the Facebook app is not going to be tracked. However, if I go to a browser and I go into an e-commerce site, I'm still being tracked, but the amount of information and events that's being tracked is going to be limited. So instead of tracking all the different events, if I have an e-commerce site, for example, like if I have add to cart, if I have checkout, if I have a purchase, it's gonna limit the amount of events that they're tracking for each user. So this has a tremendous effect on your campaigns. Why? Because of this. If people go into their app, they say, no, I don't want to track. If you think about how it works today, everything goes back into Facebook. How many purchases you did, how many add to carts, views, men's clothing, how many content views, everything that you're doing through the cookie, it's getting sent back to Facebook. However, if I select no, then instead of sending all the events, it's just going to prioritize one event. So you're going to have to select which event is the most important for you to track from those users, which for e-commerce sites, pretty obvious. You want purchases. At the end of the day, what's the most important thing you want to track on Facebook is purchase, if you're an e-commerce site. This changes if you're in lead generation, because you might want to track maybe leads, maybe webinar signups, maybe, appointments, calls. So this is where the debate goes into play. But I think what's important at this point is for you to see that when users select no, Facebook is not going to be able to track what you're doing on Facebook. And what that means is that probably the content, the experience you're going to be seeing on Facebook is going to change because they don't know what you're interacting with within the Facebook or Instagram application. And when it comes to performance on the marketer side, if someone says no, then it's going to limit the amount of events that you can actually track and see from users. So how does this really affect your campaigns? In a number of ways. Conversion tracking. You're not going to be able to track conversion as efficiently as you are doing it today, because you're not going to be able to say add to carts, checkouts, purchases. You might just be able to track one event, and that limits the amount, again, of conversion tracking that you're doing, and therefore audiences as well. Most of us use lookalike audiences based on people that go to the checkout, based on people that, go to the website. And so the capability of doing remarketing might change or will change as well. You're having less people that you're tracking within the application, within your events as well. And also to return on ad spend. Because you're tracking less conversions, that means that you're still spending the same amount of money, or maybe more, maybe less, but because you're tracking less, because users are not letting you track them, the events, the purchases, the conversions that they're doing on your site, then that's going to change and decrease the return on ad spend. And it makes sense. You're changing conversions, you're decreasing your audiences. Therefore, Facebook is less agile or less efficient in tracking those conversions and giving you the real return on ad spend. And you want to start moving into other models of return on ad spend, your estimated models, where you might want to use Google Analytics. You might want to use external tools to be able to effectively track your campaigns better. Attribution, we went from 28 days to 7 days by default. Who is this like a big deal for? If your sales and marketing cycle is long, the longer my attribution window is, the more conversion I can have, the better the return on ad spend I should be giving to my campaigns. Why? Because in theory or in general, you should be generating more conversions in 7 days than 30 days. I'm allowing Facebook, I'm giving it more time to say, hey, go back 30 days instead of just 7 days and find everyone that converted or that saw an ad or clicked on the ad. So you're going to have to prioritize events, and you're going to have to select 8, and you're going to have to prioritize which are the most important for you. Why does Facebook Conversion API is important? Because it's going to allow you and improve the conversion events and tracking that you can do on Facebook. Because we're moving from a cookie-based, tracking to a server-based tracking, and it's going to become a bit more technical, I think. Probably it's going to take some time for Facebook to adapt, to build tools to make it easy for you, but you have to be ready. So what are the things that you can do today? The first thing is verify your domain. The second thing is prioritize events. And the third thing is figure out and learn how to use Facebook API like CAPI, Shopify, Google Tag Manager on the server-side tracking, or tools like Segment if you're in B2B, so that you can actually understand better what to do. And I'm going to go over a couple of things, and I'm going to show you how to do it as well, because I think there's a whole debate on this as well. And the first thing is, how do you actually verify your domain? What are the things that you can do, and why do I need to verify my domain? There's basically 3 ways in which you can verify your domain. You could do it through DNS verification, HTML file upload, and meta tag verification. How do you access that verification? And so I did a test here just to show you, right? But if you go into your Facebook, you go into business settings, under brand safety. So if I scroll this here, brand safety domains, you're going to see the list of domains that you actually can potentially verify. I can add any domain here. I can just add it, and then I have to verify it. So, it gives me the DNS verification, HTML upload, meta tag. Don't copy this. You have to actually add the domain, and then you have to follow one of the 3 steps to verify your own domain. So it's pretty simple and straightforward, but it's a bit technical, right? If you don't know how to configure DNS verification, this has to do with where you're hosting your site, whether it's Bluehost, whether it's, any hosting where you're having it. This is where you put in the DNS TXT records. You upload that, redirect it, and it'll show and verify the domain. HTML upload, you can do this as well. In meta tag verification, I think this is probably the easiest ones for people to verify if you have WordPress, if you have tools, because the only thing you have to do is you add this tag or this code within the head of your HTML, and then you can verify your domain. So there's different ways in which you can do it. Unfortunately, it becomes a bit more technical for everyone. And so what if I don't own the domain, or I'm using a subdomain? And I think this is where the big debate is, and I don't know what Facebook is doing, but what happens if you use something like ClickFunnels, ThriveCart, Entreport, Kajabi, and so on? What do you do when you actually don't own the domain? How can you actually verify that domain? And I think this is the huge challenge everyone's having, because unfortunately, there's no clear solution at the moment. And I can't tell you what to do, because there's no way for you to verify a domain that you don't own. The only way I was able to do it, for example, with Thinkific, which is a tool we use to sell our courses and also our practice questions, is I'm actually able to go into the HTML, the code, and submit it here. However, with things like ThriveCart, with things like Typeform, you can't do it. There's no way to verify that domain at the moment, unfortunately. And that's a big deal, because then there's no way, if you can't verify the domain, then you can't configure events, and then you can't really do anything with tracking. So I think this is an issue that everyone is having at the moment. If you're listening to this right now, you're not alone. This is an issue that a lot of people, that everyone is having. And I think Facebook needs to figure out a better way to solve this and do it quickly. Because I think we're all struggling with, if I'm hosting my checkout pages, my purchase pages in ThriveCart, then I can't really use it anymore. If you're hosting your products in Kajabi, Ontraport, ClickFunnels, then you can't verify your domains. And that's a huge pain and a huge issue for all of us who are using subdomains or are using tools where we're not hosting. We don't own the domain, but we're actually just using subdomains and using hosting our websites, basically, or checkout pages, or other tools that we use within the softwares or tools that we use. So this is a big issue, I would say, and hopefully Facebook does something quickly to fix this. Shopify, you can actually do it fairly easily. The only thing you need to do is just go to Shopify Maximum Tracking. If you go to your account, Facebook account, enable tracking, select maximum, include the Facebook pixel, and that should be fairly easy to start tracking your e-commerce within Shopify. How do I prioritize events? And I think this is another thing that I've seen discussed, and also I've seen a lot of discussions within groups and online. One is make sure that you have access to your domain. And I think this is the biggest thing. If you don't have access to the domain, you can't do anything that we're looking at right now. And so if you look here, for example, it says like owned by another business. So if, let me show you an example. If we go here and we go to test verification, like here, it says that I own it, but let's say I change accounts and I'm gonna go to this one. This one has access to the domain, but it doesn't have access to the events. And you'll see that it won't let me do anything, right? Like Markeko doesn't have any domains yet. But if I go to the events manager, and this is where it becomes a little tricky and I think confusing, right? If I go to the events manager within that same account and I go to the, Markeko Spanish, right? Like this is the same. I have my pixel conversion API, and then I configure what web events. What I'll say is that, great, but you don't own this domain. Even though you have access, you don't own it, so you can't really do anything with events. So make sure that you actually have the proper access to your domain so that you can actually do the events management and change those. How do you do that? I would say fairly, I don't want to say simple, but just make sure that when you go to the domain, you click on access as well. And so let me go back to here. Let me actually show you and see if I have this here. Yeah, so if you go here, make sure that when you say partners, give access to the partners or domain access. Here's where you want to go. Within your domain, within the settings, same thing, go to domain access, click here, and this is where you can actually give access to people, advertisers. I don't know why Facebook, have these three. Allow anyone can edit at links, can edit in links, deny it, allow people. I don't know why you would use these. The only thing is you want to make sure that you allow specific advertisers, specific partners to be able to modify your events. Because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to do much. How does it work now? Well, now you can have aggregated events under your events manager. You can configure them there, and it also gives you like an event matching with your pixel, right? It shows you like the event match quality 4.2 out of 10, IP address 100%, user agent 100%, but like click ID from Facebook, not hash 8.7. So it gives you a rating in terms of how efficient is Facebook tracking users. E-commerce versus lead gen for your events. And this is the last thing I want to talk about, but I think it's something that I've seen a lot of questions as well. And it's, how do you prioritize your events? For e-commerce, I would say it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You want to go with purchases, you want to go with initiate checkout, and then you want to go think of your funnel, right? What's the most important one? Your sales, your final conversion. You want to go for purchases, and then when you want to go from purchase to checkout to add to cart to view content, and you want to do it that way. What happens with lead generation? And I think there's a whole discussion here, because your lead generation usually has a two-step process. One in which you're generating the lead through a tripwire, through a webinar, and then you're optimizing campaigns for a call, for an appointment, to schedule a meeting. And so should you prioritize the meeting or the contact? And I want to say that I am not 100% sure. But what I would do is I would actually prioritize first the appointment, the meeting, and then the contact. As long as you're generating enough meetings and enough events through your pixel. Because at the end of the day, you want to prioritize the most important event for your funnel or sales. And when it comes to lead generation, it's usually appointments, it's usually meetings, it's usually calls. You want to optimize for those custom conversions and not for the standard events. So for e-commerce, I would say it's pretty straightforward. For lead generation, I would definitely go with the other way. And again, you have to test this. This is something that is new for everyone. It's something that is new for all of us. So you're gonna have to be testing. And I'll be posting more content as well to help you with this and figure out what works best. But when you go into the Ads Manager, you'll see that you can actually select your events within the Event Manager. Let me open the next window here. If you go to, let's see, let's go to this one. Domain access, no, Events Manager. Let's change this from Markeko to, to the next one. And I'll show you that as long as I have access to the domain, I can actually change this. So if I change this, for some reason, this is showing me, let's see, let's go to this one, which is actually the owner. And let's switch. So it's switching. You'll see that I own the domain through this business manager. So I'm able to configure events. So it's going to show me, for example, for this right here, all of my events, highest priority, lowest one. If I go to edit, let's edit this. I can see, you can play around, you can move your events. I'm not going to play around with this because we're testing it out, but this is where you basically change your events, you move them. You can use standard events, you can use custom events as well. But again, go to the Events Manager, and that's where you can actually start prioritizing your conversions. And the last thing I want to share is resources. What are other things that you can get more info on and can help you with this whole mess? There's a couple of things I would say. One is there's a conversion API. There's a video that gives you more info on the conversion API or CAPI for Facebook. There's a documentation here on the developer site. If you're more on the technical, if you're a developer and you can read code, I would say go over this. If you can't, then try to go through other tools that can help you implement all of this new server tracking. I would also recommend that you definitely read Deepa's iOS guidance for Facebook advertisers. He did a ton of research. I think it's like 40 pages of just info on the impact, everything that's happening. I don't want to share this link, but what I'll share is his link where you can actually download it. So I'll share you this site as well on the content. This is where you can actually get the documentation, download it yourself. I don't want to share the the direct link, but I'll share the landing page so you can now download it as well. Also, Foxwell Digital, love these guys. They have a pretty good blog post. I think they were the first ones to come out and talk about Facebook conversion APIs, the importance of it, testing it out. I think they're pretty ahead of the curve in testing this out. There's a whole section on how to use this with Shopify, tips on doing this, and things that you can do, and the importance of using the conversion API and testing events. And last but not least, make sure that you join our group. We'll be posting more information here as well with best tips, things that you should be aware of, and things that can help you better understand how to track and how to use the conversion API and everything that we're doing. Make sure that you follow us on YouTube. We have also a podcast coming up, so make sure that you check it out on Shopify, Apple. It's called Land the Right Clients. Make sure that you subscribe to it, download them. I'm on a mission to help 1 million digital marketers with their careers, inspire them, get better, and just be the best. So thanks again for listening, guys, today. Hopefully this video helped in better understand what Facebook Conversion API is, how this whole iOS 14 mess is moving towards, and also the fact that we're moving from a cookie-based to a server-based tracking models. And that's going to change, it's going to modify, it's going to impact the industry, and it's going to affect you as a performance marketer, as a media buyer, as someone who's managing ads. You have to be aware of all of this. You have to be ready, because it will affect us. It will affect how you're doing performance, how you're doing marketing, and how you are tracking ads. So thanks again for listening, guys. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, subscribe to our podcast. We have pretty cool guests, with great feedback, things that they're doing, and also join our Facebook group. So thanks again for listening, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week and have a good day.